The Coastal Conservation League has brought on its new executive director. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with the current executive director, Dana Beach. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores.
Well, Dana, it is so good to see you again.
Well, thank you. It's always great to see you, Quintin.
I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were just back from New York, hiking with your daughter in the upstate New York. Tell me, how are you?
Well, I'm fine, and I'm delighted because things are going exactly like we hoped they would with the Conservation League. Plus, I also had a great time hiking with my daughter in the Schwamgunks, which no one, even New York, has ever heard of that place. But it's one of the beautiful old rock formations between the Hudson Highlands and the Cascades.
Right.
Great, beautiful leaves and everything.
Wow.
But here we've found somebody to take the executive director job, and her name is Laura Cantrell. She's formerly, she grew up in Mississippi,
Right.
Went to the University of Mississippi and for law school also. But has lived in D.C. for a couple of decades working on ocean policy, heading the Ocean Policy Commission. And I've actually had some connection to that because in the early 2000s, the Pew Ocean Commission formed, and I wrote the land use piece for that commission. And then there was a second Ocean Commission, and they combined the two. So this one was the Joint Ocean Policy Commission, and she has been navigating the sort of complexity of Washington politics and national politics and ocean politics, which are really tricky. And she wants to come back here, back to the South, to be involved on the local level, and is excited about that. So I think it's a great fit for her and also for us, because we've always tried to maintain a perspective that allows us to understand where we fit in the planetary context. And ocean policy is sort of necessity an international phenomenon. And Charleston, in some sense, is sort of an international resource, an international city. It's a place that perspective, I think, will be helpful.
As a matter of fact, she told Mutual News this quote: "The Coastal Conservation League has transformed conservation in South Carolina and serves as a model across the region for pragmatic conservation advocacy." What is your definition of conservation advocacy right now?
Well, it's getting things done. We have a saying, and Sarah Plow, who's our Grow Food General Manager, and I and Lisa all joke about it, but we get stuff done. We don't say stuff. We say something else that I won't say. But but pragmatic advocacy to me really is really having an understanding of where you want to go, but being very focused on outcomes. We are not an educational group per se. We do educate, but we don't do it just for the sake of education. We do it because it will produce a different future. And I want to say too that there's plenty of very good educational efforts going on. The aquarium, for example. But our niche here is changing the policies that shape settlement patterns and address water quality issues and deal with air quality and energy consumption. We want to make sure that whatever we do has a discernible, tangible outcome that benefits the future of the coast.
Obviously, today's election day, and I know that the Coastal Conservation League doesn't endorse any candidates or anything like that, but when you hear people on the campaign stuff, they're basically talking about infrastructure, wetlands. Where are we with this discussion in your mind?
Well, we are at a point of inflection. That is an easy thing to say. I think everybody thinks you're always at some turning point, and maybe in truth you probably are. But it seems to me we have now more awareness than we have ever had about the importance of investing in the right infrastructure. And I want to emphasize the right because, over the years, our leaders have basically told us that we shall build this or we shall build that, and now the public is at some level rebelling against the dictation of what we ought to be building and saying, look, we've got critical existential challenges facing us with flooding in Charleston, not just Charleston downtown,
Right.
but also West Ashley,
Right.
James Island.
Right.
And we can't afford not to deal with those issues. And we also, frankly, have a limited amount of money. We think we actually have probably more at our disposal than we've deployed. And I think that's one aspect of this election, is that the people who win, and sadly a few didn't even have opposition, but not that I'm commenting on the quality of those representatives, but we should always have opposition in political races. But they have not been able to identify the funding sources, and they haven't been able to prioritize where to spend the money. And so as a result, we're paralyzed, frankly, in terms of our investment strategy. And as a result, the battery continues to degrade and fall into the harbor. We've got flooding now for the third year in a row that is debilitating and expensive, and local homeowners are paying literally tens of millions of dollars to repair damage that really, frankly, shouldn't have happened, certainly not to the extent that it did happen. So, to your point, we've got infrastructure needs that must be met. They are not the same needs that have been delivered to us from the leadership of the region or the state. And the public is finally waking up and promoting better investment policies.
Leadership.
Right.
What is your definition of Charleston County leadership right now, and really the state?
You know, I think probably the nuclear plant is a good illustration, and I'm not commenting on the pros and cons of that technology. I mean, I think I personally hope that at some point we'll have safe technology that we can use to produce clean power, and nuclear is one option. But the way that plant was handled was classic South Carolina, where you have a bunch of people who really don't know anything about nuclear energy deciding on one of the most important investments we've ever made in the history of South Carolina, one of the largest, $12 billion. It exploded to $20+ billion. And the people they've got running it are just sort of their friends. I mean, we are very much a state of friendship and kinship. We're sort of a pre-modern state in that respect. We're not very analytical. We didn't bring anybody in who really knew how to build a nuclear plant of that sort, including Westinghouse. And so my point, I guess, is that the leadership here has got to transform from relationship-based leadership, that he's my best friend's cousin and I therefore think he should be doing this work, to analytical, fact-based leadership. We need to be clearer about what our priorities are. We need to be objective about how we accomplish those, rather than, again, subjectively bringing people on who we just happen to like. I will say, I know Keller Kassam well, who's the new head of SCANA, and I admire him and I like him. I don't know that he has any more knowledge in the nuclear field than his predecessor did, and that is some concern. But we're at a point in South Carolina where we've gone beyond the Pettigrew statement. We're too big to be too small to be an independent republic, too big to be an insane asylum. We're too big not to have professional analytical leadership anymore. You can bumble by, as we have for many, many decades, with your friends. But after a point, you've got to say, look, do we really understand this in a clear, objective, scientific, financial way? And if we don't, we've got to get rid of whoever is not making the right decisions.
And let me stay on leadership, because obviously there's still a debate over the future of 526. Where are we with that?
Well, that's another great example, and we have now bumbled into the second decade where our leaders have decreed that we shall have an interstate to Johns Island, and they have also made the case to people, some people have believed it, that this is going to be the silver bullet. It's going to solve traffic problems everywhere, West Ashley, Johns Island, James Island. The reality of it is it's an unbelievably expensive boondoggle that is going to make traffic worse in some areas and not really have much of an impact in others. It's not unlike the nuclear plant. I mean, we've got people who just are asserting that this is going to solve problems, but they have no evidence to support it, and the analysis that we all have from chats from the COG
Right.
indicates, even in the best case, very minor, almost indiscernible changes in congestion on 17, but worse congestion on Johns Island, worse congestion on James Island, and the destruction, by the way, of a very important group of neighborhoods on James Island, and the destruction of a lot of environment. And finally, the final blow to the body blow, the nail in the coffin, is that it is diverting approaching $1 billion of scarce financial resources to something that, even in its best configuration, is not a priority, and in its worst is harmful. Instead of spending it on the flooding, to deal with flooding, which we can do, using that SIB funding to deal with flooding downtown and West Ashley, we are building another road, as Mike Seeking said, from one place that floods to another place that floods without fixing the flooding. So it's, I think, frankly, in some ways, if I had to handicap the outcome, I'd say 526 is not going to be built. But what will be lost is a decade or more of opportunity that we could have used those funds for something that really would benefit the neighborhoods and communities and the city and the county.
Who is following the money?
Well, there's a lot of money being talked about, and I'll just say that there certainly is a lot of enthusiasm from some of the developers on Johns Island for this road, and so, I wouldn't say they're the main drivers, though it is interesting that they have hired over the years. They've hired lobbyists to lobby the churches on Johns Island and try to gain support unsuccessfully, but when you combine the sort of demagoguery of our political advocates for this road with the self-interest of developers, you come up with a pretty bad set of outcomes. And that's, I think, where the public can come back in. There have been some wonderful advocates on this project, including my friend Robin Welch and Rich Thomas,
right,
and who've really done incredible work to reveal the facts. I mean, in fact, there's a sign that's a quote from one of the chats reports that's still sitting up on Johns Island. I think Thomas LaGree put it up, and it says, there'll be 22,000 more cars a day with 526 than without it. But we're in an era of sort of fact-free discussion, and I think you could probably say that's true at the national level as well as local. And people simply continue to assert that this project is going to solve problems that it will have either no effect on or it will be harmful to.
So what are the facts right now?
Well, I think, again, we are facing an existential crisis in Charleston. Even on an ordinary high tide,
right, we've
got flooding that shuts down major roadways, Morrison
right,
being one of them, East Bay.
Right.
People are wringing their hands and saying, well, what are we going to do? The thing we can do is redeploy funds. Again, I'm not just using this on the 526, right, but there are plenty of sources that we can go to. The latest I heard from the Chamber of Commerce, speaking of poor leadership, is that they want to see the Glen McConnell Expressway extended to Somerville and around I-26. That's their priority. That's right through the area that is flooding so badly. And if we do that, what is going to happen to the Church Creek Basin? What is going to happen? I mean, besides just diverting whatever source of money, they don't know where the money's going to come from, but they don't seem to feel the obligation to try to identify it either. But, you know, the point is that with that lack of leadership, that lack of analysis and objectivity, promoting nothing but more road construction, not dealing with things that can really eventually cripple us, yeah, economically and otherwise in the long run, we will not survive. You know, we have the good fortune of being a very popular place now.
Sure.
But I hear people every day, in fact, I've got friends in New York, and we all do, who would love to move down here, but now they're saying, wait a minute, now I don't know about the flooding, where I can buy a house, but I got to make sure it's on a high ridge, because is the city going to actually do anything about the flooding? We can't be sure. And so if that message gets transmitted around the country, and all of a sudden we're not known as the best city in America, we're known as the wettest city in America, that's not good for anybody. I mean, it's not good for real estate values, it's not good for the economy, and it's certainly not good for the residents.
Is quality life a thing of the past?
We can regain it, I think, if we focus on the principles that we need to advance and adhere to. To me, one of them is Charleston, and this region is a region that should be oriented toward the people who live and work here.
Okay.
And that's the first thing. It's not about bringing more hotels in, the quintupling of hotel rooms, the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals.
Right.
It's not bringing more cruise ships in. It is making sure that people, to that article on Sunday in Sunday's paper, that people who work here have a set of options about living nearby, that they don't have to live in Cane Bay out in Berkeley County and drive down I-26 every day. They can do it if they want to, but they don't have to do it. So I think quality of life is what we make it. But it is complicated. I've got some good friends who now are griping with me because I have said the apartment moratorium is not a solution. Well, I think it's not a solution because that alone, we know it. I mean, it's indisputable that if we stopped all apartments tomorrow, we still have all these problems. It's a more complicated question than that. And this goes back to the silver bullet issue.
Right.
What's the silver bullet? There is no silver bullet, but I will say this, it's all about design and investment in infrastructure. And design needs to be thoughtful. We need housing mixed with non-residential uses, offices and stores,
right.
And schools. We need to have a street network that is highly integrated and connected. We've started talking about connectivity, which is good. We need a transit system that works, unlike CARTA, and we need places that people can walk and bike safely. So I think that we don't have to lose the quality of life. We don't have to. But we have to, in order to retain it, we've got to take deliberate steps that are different than the ones we're taking right now.
Dana Beach, it's always good to see. I keep learning things from you, so thank you for this interview. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Quintin. It's always delightful.
Likewise.
Thank you for doing this.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.